Hello, friends, and welcome to the first ever live recorded episode of Wild Hearts at Work. We are live right now on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter, and I am really excited to kind of bring a dream alive today. So, I told you in the kickoff episode of season 2 that one of the best things about this podcast for me that I didn't actually count on was that every person who came on this show was just an amazing person, someone that I felt like I could be best friends with. I feel like I freaked some of these people out too. So I was like, oh, you're my new best friend. And so as I went into season 2, one of the pipe dreams that I had was that I would be able to bring a few of these people together all on one episode. And so I started by talking with my guest today. And as I was talking with them, I thought, well, what if we actually did it live? Remember, like in the 80s when sitcoms were filmed before a live audience? How cool would that be? And so today, these 3 amazing humans agreed to do this experiment with me and do it all together. So I am excited to introduce them to you. We're going to talk about one major question, and then I'll put that on the table with them once we bring them onto the podcast. So, my first guest, I met her because she went viral on TikTok with her ideas and philosophies about how she runs her company, the Freelance CFO. And I just want to say, like, how cool is that to be like, I went viral on TikTok. So I want to welcome to the live cast, Katelyn Magnuson of the Freelance CFO. Hi, Katelyn. Welcome.
Hello. Yes, who would have thought that going viral on TikTok would have been, the way to meet wonderful people like yourself.
Yeah, I mean, here we are on Wild Hearts at Work live. And my next guest, I always joke that Bob had to teach me how to sound not like a fool on live television because in his role when we met, he was a PR king and he did media training with me and a million of other things. So I'm super grateful to Bob. But also, as I got to know him better, there were so many things that he believes about running a company, especially in today's world, that I resonate with. So I want to welcome from Race Point Global, Bob Osmond.
Hello. Good to see you.
So much
Hey, Katelyn.
power.
Hey, Bob.
And lastly, you know him, you love him. He is the author of Joy Inc. and Chief Joy Officer. He is the Chief Joy Officer and the CEO of Menlo Innovations, and a good friend of mine who also helps me not to sound super foolish and doesn't help me not to be radical, though. My favorite wild heart, Rich Sheridan.
Great to be with you, Melissa, Bob, and Katelyn. Wonderful to meet you both.
Hey, Rich. I just want to say I'm very jealous of your title.
The business card actually says Chief Storyteller, too. So
okay. Yeah. I don't know that I could pull off Chief Joy Officer, but I do like it.
I feel like I need to rework my title.
Hey, this is the joy of being a leader. Is you could do that.
That's
so
right.
Next time we have another group podcast, we're going to have Katelyn with Bob with these like beautiful rainbow titles somehow. Well, welcome to all of you. As I've gushed enough, you know that I adore all 3 of you. I think that your leadership is exactly what we need, especially in this place that we're in the world as we slowly find our way. We're not quite there, but slowly find our way out of this pandemic and quarantine. You know, the world is sort of looking up and going, what do we do now? You know, what does work look like now? One of my biggest revelations was how much people were reprioritizing, their lives and what does work look like? And so the question that I had placed in front of you all, probably about 2 or 3 weeks ago, maybe, to think about was what are the skills and attributes that today's leaders need to have? And how has that changed specifically over the last 2 years? So we're looking at leadership now in 2022, even versus 2019. Everything has changed. And so I'm going to lay that question on the table with you right now.
Okay, well, I'll kick off on my side of things. So I think that what's more important now than ever before, just seeing, we run a fully remote firm, and we were doing it before it was cool, is direct, clear, compassionate communication. And I think that this was important before, but I think being remote, this is so much more vital because my team is all over the US or traveling depending on where they're at. And I think being able to have clear lines of communication and understanding where each of us are at. And if someone is struggling, because it's one thing to see someone in an office and be able to pick up on their demeanor or, see that they're struggling or see that, maybe there's some personal things going on and address that. And now, having that empathy and having the communication and the psychological trust and safety in the organization is so much more important. And I think more noticeable for individuals that are working remotely.
Love that. I'm going to actually really quick before we go to the next point, just ask Bob and Rich. So Katelyn's organization's always been remote. What is your group's certain situations? Are you remote, hybrid, back in the office?
Well, sorry, Rich. So RPG, we are 100% flexible. I would say 100% remote, but we do have offices. So we have our headquarters is in Boston. We have a space there that people can go to if it suits them. We have a space in Raleigh, North Carolina that the team there goes to on occasion. We no longer have a space in San Francisco because the folks in the Bay Area didn't feel they get together at different points, and I'm actually based in New York. So our mantra is work where you work best, you have total autonomy, just be accountable. That's essentially how we run.
Rich, what about you guys?
Yeah, well, as you know, Melissa, we have been this intensely in-person team for the first 18 and a half years of our 20-year history. You can see the space behind me here. We probably have about a third of the team in the office. And we have explicitly communicated to the team for all of our years how much we value being in person together. Obviously, that changed dramatically 2 years ago. And we've learned a lot that we can't unlearn from what we've seen. And our spirit here is one of flexibility. We're in a mode right now that we tell people, our invitation to you, our encouragement is some people should be in the office some days and you get to decide. We're moving soon into most people should be in the office some days, but you get to decide. And that means some people will not come in, and that's okay. We've had some good one-on-one conversations with team members who have a variety of concerns that, whether it's pandemic concerns, personal health concerns about others in their immediate family, that sort of thing. All of those are listened to. And that's what I would say to Katelyn's answer as well, is that part of that honest communication we're having with people is, as leaders, I think where we need to really turn up the dial is in the listening skill. Like asking questions and then really, really listening, not just listening with your ears or your brain, but listening with your heart, understanding, where are the concerns for people. So we will still have an office. We are still largely an Ann Arbor, Michigan-based company. We do have some people, though, now who are farther away, and some who literally cannot come into the office for very deeply personal health reasons. And I think this is a neat element of where we've gotten to societally, is I think there are people now who can enter the workforce who couldn't have entered the workforce before.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. The reason I asked, I took us down a little bit of a bunny trail, but I actually think that context is important when we're talking about our own leadership, because, Katelyn kind of connected that for me in that split second. It's like, you might have to lead differently if you're in a hybrid versus a remote situation. I say might, you definitely have to lead differently. So I think it's just good for the listeners to kind of have that context as we're talking about like what's important about leadership today. So Bob or Rich, big question. What skills or attributes?
Well, so since I'm directly below Katelyn, I'll just, at least on my screen, I don't know for anyone else. I think The double down on everything she said. I think clarity of communications is critically important. I think compassion is critically important, and I view empathy and compassion as obviously twin engines, but I think of empathy as sort of, yeah, I feel you, or I've been there before, and compassion is more action oriented, which is how can I help you? And so I think that's critically important. And a lot of these words we throw around, and it's hard to disaggregate them. Like it's kind of a ball of yarn because they're intertwined and they bring richness and meaning to each other. But in terms of skill as a leader, I think I've been thinking a lot lately about that word trust. And I think of it as it's kind of ephemeral in a way. Like, well, it's just sort of something that it's almost like an outcome, right, of certain actions. Like if you do all of these things, then you will create trust. But I've been thinking a lot about it in the sense of command and control, whatever, is dead, right? It doesn't really work anymore. And to Katelyn's point, because you can't see anybody really when we're all, yeah, you can see them in their little perfect square, like everything's great. Oh, look at, but you can't really see. You can't see if someone's at their desk from 8 a.m. until 10 o'clock at night. You can't see that. Whereas, in the before times, I could walk around or what it's like, hey, it seems like you were here last night or whatever it might be. You can't see that anymore. So, and you can't see how people are interacting or how they're feeling. So for me, it's trust is a skill. And it seems odd to think of trust as a skill, but I think that that's the key, is embracing this notion of radical trust, that people are doing the right thing at the time that is right for them because they know that their job is to be accountable to their colleagues, to their clients, and hopefully to themselves. And by themselves, I mean their personal lives, whether they have a family or not, or that they're taking care of themselves. And so we have to radically trust, I think, that people are doing what they're supposed to be doing when they're supposed to be doing it. I think we have to radically trust that people are coming at every situation with positive intent. And I think until proven otherwise, that's just the default position. Where we come from, this seems like decades ago now, but a world where you could kind of see. And there's so much bias embedded in that, proximity bias and other things. And so that's what I'm really working on, is just believing that everyone's doing what it is they need to do when they need to do it, and my job then is to create the conditions for them to feel that they can do that. So Katelyn said clarity of communication is one of them. Clarity of expectations is another. And giving people the tools to be successful is kind of our job, I think, as leaders.
I'm going to soft punt something to Rich, because I'm a big believer that if you take something away from humans, this could be my kids, this could be, the people that we work with, you have to, something that's valuable to them. You have to replace it with an alternative. And one of the things that you said, Bob, was, oh shoot, I don't know if you did say it or not, but basically like structures or processes to make that possible. And when I look at Rich and Menlo, they have such like gorgeous, it's not even just process, it's like ways of working that provide a replacement for command and control. So Rich, will you tell us a little bit about what that looks like?
You bet. Yeah, I appreciated that Bob said that hierarchical authority is dead. It probably never actually worked. We just convinced ourselves it did, and it felt comfortable, so we just did it.
For us.
And typically that involves leading with fear, motivating people with artificially created fear. How's it going? What you working on? Are you coming in this weekend? That sort of thing. I was really good at that once upon a time. I could probably raise 10 points of blood pressure in a second with some managerial quip I had stored away in my brain. But since our founding, we've never had bosses here. So this is, I mean, I'm not even sure you describe this as a flat team, because that would almost imply there's still that structure. We do have leaders, and leadership can come from anywhere. And I think, for us, just recently, I was kind of reminded how powerful this can be. Because we don't have bosses, therefore you don't have like this traditional annual performance review process, which there's another process in managerial systems that never, ever worked the way anybody wanted it to. But the only way people get a promotion here, get a raise, is through peer evaluation. And we've done that throughout our history. But because of the pandemic and some of the effects, we decided to get far more intentional about that. And we kicked off a project maybe 6 to 9 months ago. We called the Prosperity Project. And I gave the lightest amount of guidance to the team on this because they wanted to rework the system. And I said, great, you guys do it. If I do it, it'll suck. You guys know what you need and that sort of thing. But I told them, I said, do not make the Prosperity Project, is our internal code name for it, about raises and promotions. Make it about personal growth of each team member, and the other stuff will simply follow along. And wow, what they have come up with, we actually now do tours on our prosperity process, the typical Menlo thing, like share it with the world. So free tours, you can come and see how we do evaluations of our team members and how they encourage each other's personal growth. And it's been just, we had a new guy join our team about a year ago, and we've had a lot of people join our team in the last year, but he was one of the first people to go through the new process, and his statement was just golden for me. He said, wow, I have never felt so valued at a company I've worked for before. And it was all coming from his peers and no bosses. James and I, my co-founder, and I don't get involved in this at all. Quite frankly, I didn't even know how the whole process works. So, but they are so pleased with it. They present on it. They're proud of it. They own it. And they are continuing they still refer to it as an experiment. When they invite people into the process, they're like, welcome to the prosperity experiment, which is neat, right? Because everybody's like, okay, so it's still adjusting, it's still shifting. And I think all those kind of things are just, really critical now.
So I've heard communication, I've heard trust, and I liked the idea that like trust is an outcome. I know you went a little bit further with that, Bob, but it's an outcome of creating all of these other things that allow you to be radically trusting. So, the idea of peer accountability, but that's a skill of the leader, strangely, right? It's a skill of the leader to be able to create the space for people to hold each other accountable safely and not be looking at you every time. Right? Well, hold them accountable. Why aren't you holding them accountable? What else we got? What else we got in terms of skills and attributes? Again, for now, things that are new, maybe, that we didn't have to have 3 years ago.
What? Oh, go ahead, Rich.
Oh, I was just, I was thinking just the words that came to mind for me, Melissa, one is just intentionality.
Yeah.
I think there are so many things that could easily happen when we were always together, when we were always around each other. And now, if you're not intentional about some of those things, they're not going to happen at all.
Yeah.
You're going to wake up one day and suddenly like, holy cow, I haven't talked to Joe in like 9 months, even though he's still on the team. And so just to give you an example, here the team realized that was happening. And they just set up a new pattern. And my life is one where I go where the team tells me to go. And so 1 to 2 times a week, my co-founder and I meet one-on-one, 2-on-1, I guess, with a team member. And we tell them there's no agenda. We're just here to talk, bring up anything you want. Amazing what ideas come out of this conversation, what actionable ideas come out of it. And we take action on them because then the team member's like, oh my gosh, I say something and the next day something's happening. And so I think those kind of opportunities have to be intentionally created. We can't just rely on happenstance anymore.
How do you make that happen, Katelyn?
I
With
was
your
just
fully
thinking about
distributed
that.
team?
Yeah, no, I was just thinking about that. So we're still constantly evolving, right? And that's, kind of to what Rich was saying. We're working on being more team led. I will have, an idea or something like, hey, I'd really like to have a channel where we're shouting out wins, but I don't want to be the one, execute on that. What do you guys want to do this? What does this look like? And so we've been doing similar things with being intentional with our time, with our communication. And so for us, that looks like 2 in-person retreats per year that we're doing. That's something that our team has found really valuable. And we continue to get feedback from them. So if we get to the point where they're like, you know what, we're not feeling the 2 a year, or, maybe we're looking to do group painting nights, or as we grow larger, maybe, because I've actually, I've looked at some of those where it's like, oh, we can send everyone their own activity and we can do these online, which is a really great, area for us to be connecting. But I think the beauty of all of that as a leader is that I'm constantly listening to what they're saying and where they're driving versus, we're not doing some top down, hey, I want all of these things done. We're opening a conversation up, and that happens with how we're spending our time together, with how we're, growing or changing or running the business, and makes me feel like all of us have buy-in, which I think is really important as well with where we're headed.
Absolutely. Bob, what about you?
The word intention is critically important. And I think because we were in such a default mode before of, well, everybody just does this, so we do this. Then what happened, I think, when the pandemic started, there was a lack of intention in terms of how we meet. So everything became, oh, well, we have to do a Zoom meeting. And maybe we're just not good as human beings at nuance or gray areas, but it was either we went from, oh, no one ever wanted to do video calls to now it's all we do is video calls, right? So to that notion of intention, we set cultural norms around certain things. So when we have an all hands meeting, which we do a 30-minute all hands for the entire, whomever can make it, it's their choice. They want to be on video, great. If they want to walk while we do the video, fine. But we do find those moments when we want to see everybody because it is important. But we make those choices with intention. The other thing Katelyn said that is related to this is we have to embrace, and Rich, you said this too, even by virtue of using the word experiment. We have to just test and learn constantly. And so the cadence of communications that we have at RPG has changed in 2 years. We used to have the weekly half-hour all hands, and then a monthly 1-hour meeting, and then a quarterly. We just asked the team, okay, what do you need? Is this working? We would try things. We tried this thing for a while because I wanted folks to, we have these values. And so for me, we're either living them or they're not serving us. So if we do have them and we believe in them, then we have to replicate them or intentionally bring them forward in everything we do. And so, one of the values is curiosity, obviously, but another is, this notion of having a growth mindset. So owning when we mess up and learning and trying to create a culture where there is no fear. And that means no fear to try new things, because if you haven't done it before, it's fine. Yeah, you might mess up, you might not. Either way, you're gonna grow as a result. But we test and learn constantly. So but the point I was going to make was we tried this thing called the devil's advocate, where we appointed someone in every all hands meeting, and their job was to ask the question that they figured we didn't want them to ask, but that probably other people had on their minds. And the notion was, because we believe in having a service mindset, they would be of service to their colleagues by pushing and pressuring and poking at things that maybe we weren't as clear about as we thought, or where there was a say-do disconnect, whatever it might be. And then what we learned was we kind of transparented ourselves out of needing. That's a new word I just made up. We were so transparent that it was getting to the point where those big questions, no one had them anymore. So everyone's like, do we need to do this anymore? I'm like, no, we don't need it. So we shifted. And then we focused people. Now we highlight one employee every week, and their job is to share how they're using time confetti. And time confetti are these like little bits of time that you have throughout the day when maybe, a meeting ends early, or maybe something gets canceled, or whatever it might be, or you finish a deliverable, or just how do you use that time to benefit yourself? Because we're trying to normalize wellness and self-care, because if you have values like authenticity, belonging, and compassion as your foundation, then you have to create the conditions where you normalize all that stuff. So I don't even know if I've answered the question, but I think that the notion of intentionality and this idea of testing and learning with intention too is important.
I want to connect really quick, time confetti and wellness, as you're speaking about it, Bob, with probably the main thing that brought Katelyn onto the podcast initially. There was so much amazing things that were underneath it. But Katelyn, you went viral on TikTok because you talked about the number of hours that are the maximum that your employees can work. Can you talk about that really quick?
Yeah. So again, I didn't think it was as game changing as it was going to be at the time, but we have some set hours. So very much I've worked, salary for years, and you could have, 60, 70-hour work week, like depending on the environment that you're in, they're not always the healthiest. They can lead to a lot of burnout and not prioritize or not value prioritizing yourself. And so the premise, if we're going to be bringing on employees, is I wanted to be creating a company. I think we probably all feel this way, that we would want to work at ourselves. I didn't want something where I had, people that I saw as my lessers or any of these other toxic culture environments that we see. And so for us, that looks like a standard work week of 25 to 32 hours, 32 being the cap. And my goal here is that our team members are being intentional, the word again, but they're being intentional with their time. I'm not here to encourage you to have, butts in seats for 8, 10, 12 hours a day. I want you to get in, get everything done, and then go do the things outside of work that light you up. And if that means you take a 3-hour break in the middle of the day because you have kids or you have a workout or you have something that you really want to do that you love, then that works for us. And the goal here is for us to use that as a metric. If someone is regularly bumping up against 32 hours a week or going over, we're then having a conversation. Do we need to be hiring? Are there too many things on this individual's plate? Are things not being done efficiently? Do they need additional tools, resources? And so we use that as a metric for us to know that, that's kind of waving the flag that like, hey, we need to look at this further. And it's definitely a work in process. It's tax season. So for us, it's, always a struggle to keep things under that 32 hours. And we've had a few weeks where we've been over, but it's also fostering conversation. Hey, is this feeling good where we are now? Do we feel like this is a temporary thing? Do we need to be making changes? And I think that it, as a whole, it has allowed the team to feel comfortable raising concerns when they feel like they may have something on their plate it's overwhelming. They have too much. They need assistance. Whereas in places they've worked before, that may not have been the case. It may have been frowned upon if they brought up feelings of overwhelm or feelings of being underprepared for something.
And Katelyn, I sense that this is just sort of part of who you are, but do you think that the pandemic had a little bit of an influence of like, we need to take care of ourselves, that maybe 3 years ago, this might've been something that you thought about, but like, this kind of pushed it a little bit further?
I would say definitely. I mean, I myself have always been this way, and you and I have chatted about this, but being neurodivergent for me, I've worked in spurts or gotten everything done significantly quicker at most of the corporate, environments that I'd worked at in the past, and had found myself not rewarded, but in fact punished, with getting more work or being promoted to having more responsibilities without any of the pay or any of the great things. And so for me, the pandemic further highlighted it was really that intersection of like corporate toxic work hustle and intentionality and self-care and wellness and mental health. And so, yeah, I think it was really the perfect storm to be able to feel really confident and to resonate. I mean, as we saw from TikTok, to resonate with a lot of people that are in work environments right now that are striving for something that lets them feel balanced. Not everyone goes to work to be fulfilled, and that's okay. But if you're going to work somewhere, it should be supplementing your life, and it should be a part of your life that allows you to live your best, express your best self. And so that's what I feel has really come from the pandemic is needing to feel this way, needing to feel that you have options, that you can live a life that feels aligned.
Yeah. So one of the things that brings up for me when we're talking about skills and attributes today actually has to do with not the pandemic, but just some of the things that we've seen over the past couple of years regarding just diversity. I feel like I don't want to be one of those people that makes this a buzzword, but it's very real, right? The idea of as leaders navigating, not just like making sure we hire enough people that are diverse, but actually like caring for the people that we have hired and, understanding all kinds of, different divergence, if you will. I think it's even more, front and center now, things like, just neurodivergence. And so I'm curious for the three of you, what do you think that looks like in terms of skills and attributes, besides the ones we've already talked about, that sort of play into navigating that? Because I think it's awesome that we're being, that we're now actually like facing that.
I think humility and understanding that we are constantly learning, evolving, and making mistakes can be really important, because I don't expect to know everything. I don't expect to be this perfect human. And so I think so much of that is acknowledging that we are always trying to do our best, but that even doing our best can still have harm, and acknowledging if, our actions have caused harm, and being able to move forward in a manner that continues to express our intentions while supporting those around us without centering ourselves, I think it's always been important, but I think is extra important as we are just working to create, a more inclusive, psychologically safe work environment.
I think too, Melissa, it's probably tends to be the type of people you bring on your show. We have to just challenge the status quo wherever we look, right? There are so many traditions of corporations that have lived on for well past their shelf life, and we have to look at everything. And one of my themes over the last couple of years is just trying to inject an agility, lowercase a agility, into traditional human resource processes. How do you recruit? How do you interview? How do you select? How do you onboard? How do you promote and give feedback? And there is so much that is ripe there for change that I believe if you do things differently enough there, you can start to embrace an incredibly divergent team. Just give you an example of one of the things we don't do here is when we're interviewing the people who are participating, and again, the team builds a team, they don't get to see resumes. What I tell the team is, nope, you're going to look at the human. You're not going to look at a resume. Do not evaluate a human being on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. Where did they go to school? Did they go to the same place you did? And all that kind of stuff. Because now all of a sudden you're looking at this person, you're like, wow, this person's really interesting. And then you find out, oh my gosh, we're hiring a programmer whose highest degree of education was a welding certificate. I will tell you, in my old life, that would have never happened. Never in a million years. That resume wouldn't have made it. It would have made it from the envelope to the garbage can about as quickly as possible. And so when you change, if I tell people, traditional HR people, we don't look at resumes when we're doing interviewing, they're like, what? Like, how is that possible? Right? And, but again, we are ripe for challenging everything about the way things have been traditionally done.
I love that.
Go ahead, Bob.
I was just going to say, I love that sort of disruption of the way it's typically done, because that's always the shorthand. Like, well, let me just look at the resume, rather than having the people doing the interviewing just trust that, there's that word again, but that if the HR folks are saying, I want you to speak to this person, we're thinking about them for this role, let me know what you think. They say, well, I need to see the resume. You say, no, you don't. Because we wouldn't have brought them to you if they had zero adjacent or direct skills. But I think to the point of diversity, that's obviously one way of doing it. And fundamentally, we have to figure out ways to play to people's strengths. And I think this is one of the challenges. So I work in the PR communications realm. We are, I don't know, I want to say we're the worst, but we are not a diverse cohort. And it's something that everyone is actively trying to address. And we have to be thinking in terms of adjacencies. So if I've got I don't know, I don't think we've ever had a welder submit a resume. But if they have a passion for technology, if they're curious, if they want to learn, I mean, we have had people transition to new careers with us, and it's not an easy thing. But if we provide the environment where they can grow and we invest in them, then I think it absolutely can work. And the whole DEI, those three letters, that's another kind of ball of yarn or a Venn diagram. And I guess my perspective on that is, if we're having challenges getting more diverse talent, whether it's neurodiverse, racially, whatever, then okay. But what we need to focus on, at least until such time as we can be more diverse, we absolutely have to nail equity, 100%, and we have to nail inclusion. Because the problem is, if we do not fix those two things, then it's not going to be a welcoming environment for more diverse talent, period. So I think where we fall down sometimes is we oversimplify. Well, since D is the first one in DEI, let's just look at that, and then we'll deal with the other stuff later. But this is a system; it's connected, or a three-legged stool, or whatever it might be. But if you don't create a culture that's inclusive and a culture of belonging, and you don't have equity, you're sure as hell not going to be successful creating a diverse workforce. I don't think.
I have a good friend, Professor Diana Wong at Eastern Michigan University, and she says, we're saying it backwards. It should be inclusiveness, equity, and diversity is an outcome of those first two.
That's right.
And I'll throw out one other non-traditional idea, and we are public with our pay rates here. If you want to get to equity, publish how everybody at Menlo knows what everybody else is making. I'll have Fortune 500 executives come here on a tour, and they see and it's publicly displayed, so even they see it, and they start hyperventilating. They're like, oh my gosh. I mean, because your compensation system is so convoluted, you'd never want to share it with anybody, right? And I won't say ours is perfect, but I'll tell you what, you start putting it out there in front of everybody, and you can see the imperfections, and then the team starts working on it. It's like, well, that doesn't seem right. Why is it like that? And just a weird outcome of this, which I would have never anticipated, and I'm not even sure I can fully explain, in a system like this where it's all peer evaluation and publicly displayed, the top 7 earners here are all women.
Woo!
Yeah, that's what happens and then I look at the guys and I'm like, guys, I promise we will set up a committee. We will
the poor guys.
Because this wasn't intentional. I swear to you, I don't know how this has happened, but we will set up a task force to make sure we understand why you all are promoting the women faster than the guys.
There on International Women's Day, there's a Twitter bot that was created. It was actually specifically for the UK, so it doesn't do it to us. But anytime someone would tweet something about, International Women's Day, like, we love women here, it would retweet it, and it would report on the pay gap. So at this company that says they love women, the pay gap is like 18%, because I guess I I'm speaking about this without knowing enough about it, but there's like some sort of report that is required of them, maybe as public companies or something. I don't know what it is, but so this bot can access that report automatically and then like report it. And so it was so funny. Now there's nuance to that too. Some of them responded and said, well, that's outdated. We've been working on this. Fine. But yours, Rich, would because it would report on the positive ones too. And so it would say when a company
I guess, or something.
Yeah.
I
love that.
And, let's face it, as if somehow women aren't going to be as good at what we do. I mean, there's no like brute physical strength required to design and develop software. You need good brains for doing that.
We have pretty good brains, Katelyn, don't we?
I think so. Most of the time.
Oh,
no, I love that. I saw that going around, Melissa, when companies were doing that, it was exposing the hypocrisy to an extent. I didn't see any that were positive. So I'm glad that there were, some that were exposed for, espousing the values they have. But it was kind of a sassy take.
It was
cute. Sassy take. I like that.
Yes.
We need a little sass.
So I saw both of you, Bob and Katelyn, nodding when he said transparency. So do you have some level of salary transparency as well?
Yeah, we do.
Go for it, Bob.
So we publish, what we do is publish salary bands by market, by title. And so it's not like everybody knows exactly what someone is making, but they know, okay, if I am a senior account executive in Raleigh, North Carolina, this is the base that I'm going to make. And then they can see, oh, if I get promoted to account supervisor in Raleigh, North Carolina, then that's what I could be making. So it just takes away all of that kind of negative, toxic, silly energy.
Right.
And let's face it, people talk about what they make anyway. They're all talking about it. So take the air out of that balloon and let people focus on substantive matters like, are you learning? Are you feeling fulfilled? Are you energized by the work? Versus them wondering, well, what's my plan? Like you could actually come to RPG as a account coordinator. You could map out, you could map out your whole career, your whole financial plan based on what we outlined. Well, I think it's reasonable for me to be at this level in 3 years or 4 years. So we're transparent about salaries. We revisit them every year based on industry data, some quantitative stuff and some qualitative based on conversations we're having, what we're hearing, and then we publish them. And so where it gets opaque, and we're talking about this, it does get a little more challenging as you move up the ladder in terms of just because the market seems to dictate things differently at senior levels, but everyone on their pathway up knows what their development plan is, and they know what they could be earning at any given point in that plan.
Katelyn?
Nice. Yeah, we're still working on developing that. So we have within our team, when we're talking, we have starting rates for various positions, and it is very clear across the board that there is, equal footing for everyone when they're coming in at whatever level they're at. And we are working on establishing kind of what Bob was just laying out, having these, bands essentially based on where someone is at. And then my plan is to be able to have those, public. We're in the middle of revamping the website, doing all the things. But as we're looking to continue hiring and growing over the next, 5-10 years, I want that pay transparency to be available because, I'm a firm believer that pay transparency only benefits the employers, and having been places where discussing pay was discouraged, and then finding out that a lot of my male counterparts, despite me negotiating every job I've ever had, finding out that some of my male counterparts that were doing significantly less were making significantly more was something that was absolutely infuriating. And so having that transparency and having that additional, accountability, I think, within the company as a leader, as an employer, and knowing that no matter who you are, you fall in these ranges, I think is incredibly important. And also for having a clear path. If you're looking to, move up through the ranks or to grow with the company, you know what that path could look like for you. And we're still young enough and growing that path is kind of make your own to an extent. But my plan is, as we continue to grow, there's still flexibility for that, but there's also clear delineated tracks for advancement and growth.
Amazing. So we're getting close to.
Let me offer up one thing to your audience, because I'm sure, we're sharing ideas here where some people are just shaking their heads like, oh my gosh. But here's the thing. If you go in this direction, the amount of anxiety, the amount of internal angst, the amount of sidebar conversations going, there is so much that just disappears.
100%.
Because I will tell you, the managerial mindset here at Menlo is, if you don't share information, people will make up stuff in its absence, and they never make up a better story than the truth. It's always a worse story. And so you start putting the transparency piece out there, and everybody's like, okay, you just disarmed that nuclear weapon sitting over there.
Yeah.
You just take it out of the equation.
100%. I could similarly, the hiring events that I've done in the past that are very close to what you do, Rich, with your interviewing, do a similar thing when you bring all the candidates on, into the house together. And
just
suddenly
last night, Melissa.
Yes. It was incredible to watch, because now it's humanized each other, and they started wanting to help each other get jobs. If you don't get this job, let's talk, because I think I know another role for you. And it just takes these stories we tell ourselves, whether we want to or not. When you sort of are faced with the truth, it kind of takes that off the table, and then that makes room for a new energy, right? It's not just that noise goes away. It's that it makes room for, a different heartbeat, maybe. So we're getting close to the end of our time. I want to recap. I've been writing down just keywords as we've been going through this, and I'm sure I did not capture all of them. But reminding us that the big question was, what are the key attributes and skills that leaders need in today's workplace, particularly contrasting to, maybe 2-3 years ago. So I've got communication, I've got trust, I've got accountability. And I want to point out with accountability, it's both creating processes and structures that peers can hold each other accountable. But a lot of things that we've talked about, and we haven't called it out yet, are actually holding us accountable as leaders. And maybe for the first time, in corporate history, at least to this degree. Intentionality, experimentation, taking it to the team. That's a skill. It is a skill to do something that you would normally just do yourself and go, hey team, what do you think? What's the best way to approach this problem? Inclusivity, equity, diversity, in that order, transparency. And then one that I wanted to call out, but Bob said something at one point about a default mode. And the thing that I have seen is that we are much more awake now. Post-pandemic, the things that we used to take for granted, the things that we used to just do because we've always done them, the little wild hearts in the world, the people on this panel, the people that have been on my podcast and, up until now, we didn't necessarily always operate that way. But now this is the prime time to shake things up and be much more awake now. And we are awake to things, even the wild hearts that perhaps we weren't awake to before. So amazing answers to this question. I am so privileged to have the three of you on here to talk about it. I want to give you a minute to just tell people, what do you have going on? How can they find you? This is your time to shine for a minute or so. Let's start with Katelyn.
Okay. I'm on TikTok. Shocker. My handle's at Katelyn.Magnuson. That will eventually be changing. And then our website is thefreelancecfo.biz. We provide full service accounting services, and we work with a lot of creatives and millennial business owners. And you can also find me on Instagram under the Freelance CFO.
Thank you, Katelyn. I was trying to spotlight you, and it spotlighted me, and that did not go as planned.
We're all good.
Bob, tell us about you. Where
I
can
wish
we
I had
find
a
you?
book to plug or something. So we're Race Point Global. We're an integrated, independent communications firm, and we like to think we help shape conversations that matter for technology forward brands. And so we are always looking for curious folks who are interested in the world of communications and technology. And so look us up at racepointglobal.com or find me wherever, LinkedIn, I guess, Twitter, and we'd love to talk.
Awesome. Rich.
Yeah, we do what a lot of firms like us do. We design and develop custom software on behalf of our business clients. It is our mission that sets us apart, and the mission is supported by the culture. We want to end human suffering in the world as it relates to technology. So, for example, Melissa, you were trying to highlight Katelyn, but for some reason you highlighted yourself. It's a small version of, it's not designed right. It should be. So we have a group of high-tech anthropologists on our team who would design those mistakes out of the system. And the culture itself is shareable. So people come by the thousands every year to visit us, learn about how we do what we do. And during the pandemic, we went to virtual versions of that. So we offer 2 free tours a week that people can just sign up for. They last 90 minutes each, and then a whole bunch of other free events where you can learn about the unusual things we do here, like that Prosperity Project. We do that about once a month. And so come visit. menloinnovations.com is our website, and up in the upper right-hand corner, you can just take a tour.
Woo! Snaps for all 3 of you. Thank you, all 3 of you, for being here and for the work that you do in the world. It is noticed and it is appreciated. It is what is helping us move forward into a better workplace in general. You are setting wonderful examples for the folks that are listening and watching the podcast.
Thank you, Melissa. I learned a lot, Rich and Katelyn. Thank you so much. It was great to meet you.
Yeah, thank you to both of you.
Yes.
And Melissa.
You hang out with cool people, Melissa.
I know, I'm so lucky. And to you, my listeners, I hope that this was a fun, maybe a little bit different episode. To those of you who are live right now, thank you for hanging with us and dropping some comments in. And to those listening on a regular cadence, thanks for coming back week after week. You are what makes this joyful and fulfilling for me. And I will continue to bring you all the amazing wild hearts that I meet. So until next time, dear hearts, stay wild.